All right, howdy hamsters. I'm Leather Stores, and I'm from Portland, Oregon, and I have a restaurant here called Noble Rot. And today I am doing a collaboration with my friends at the Daily Leaf and Magical Butter. We're gonna be making 3 dishes. But I'm gonna do a spring vegetable tart with green garlic, king oyster mushrooms, and some Swiss chard. The way we're gonna work the cannabis into that is in the crust. Then we're gonna do just a really quick, simple salad because I have a garden on top of my roof and things are popping now and I like to show off. And then finally, the easiest and best dessert I know. This is a dessert for cooks. It's a brown butter and almond cake and you will like it. Dang it. So let's get started. I'm gonna roll right into that pastry crust. The crust that I'm gonna make for that spring vegetable tart is a pretty simple, straightforward dough that we use at the restaurant. It is 2 cups of flour, 2 sticks of butter, a big pinch of salt, and ice water. And the only really tricky part of this recipe is that you don't overwork it, make the dough tough. And the addition of the ice water is a feel thing. It's not something I can give you a quantity on and be confident in. So you'll have to watch, and I'll give you a few things to look for when you're making your own dough. This butter, having been mixed with whole butter, is at a strength of 4 milligrams per gram. That's 28 times 8, oh no. 224 milligrams all day. I'm just mixing the flour and the butter. I'm mixing the two, but I do not want to mix it 100%. I want to have some outstanding pieces of butter in the flour. And what that does is when the tart goes into the shell and when the shell goes into the oven, the water that's trapped in those little slicks of butter puffs. And that's when you get flaky layers of pastry. And now is that feel part we talked about. So take that off. Salt's in there, butter's in there, flour's in there, and now we add the water. It is better to do this slowly. You can always add more water. Adding more flour and butter is a problem. And right now, it looks to me like I've got a pretty solid dough here. Now I'm gonna do what's called a book fold. A book fold sounds a little bit more exciting than it is. Just gonna push it out, 1/3 in. 1/3 over. And if you're fancy, you can do it again. But the more you work dough, the longer it needs to rest. Here we are. Infused AF is what the kids say. And there's our dough. I'm gonna put it right back in the bowl and put it in the freezer or fridge for 30 minutes. All right, so that crust has got to rest and you don't want to wait for it, so let's do something else. I'm gonna do the filling. And the recipe that I gave you for the filling is ambiguous, not because I'm a jerk, but because this is a pretty elastic tart. And for me, I always think it's important to represent the time and the place. So with that being said, we are representing spring in Portland with green garlic and thyme. T-H-Y-M-E, thyme, from my roof. Did I mention that I had a garden? And then some Swiss chard and some oyster mushrooms, one of my favorites. It's nice when you're doing infused food to give people a little control over the situation. I think just that in and of itself makes them less nervous. This is a non-stick pan. It's not important, but it's what they have here, so we're using it. Green garlic into the pan. And this thyme is tender and fresh enough that I'm just gonna throw the whole kit and caboodle in there, and then we'll pull it out after. And anything we forget is gonna end up in the tart. good old olive oil, just plain old olive oil. And I'm gonna use quite a bit of it. You can see to that amount, and let's say that's a cup of green garlic, 2 tablespoons of thyme. We've got 3 tablespoons of olive oil in there. That's no joke, but bear with me because that olive oil is gonna get used twice. A nice big generous pinch of salt and straight to the stove. There we go. Now it's cooking. Right there by the magical butter machine. I don't know if you can see that, but there it is. When I first got that thing, I kind of giggled. It reminded me of Close Encounters. Kind of spins around. It looks ridiculous. But this machine, it works. And what I really like about it is that there are temperature variations. I do, for my butters and oils, I do the 2-hour cook at 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's keeps a lot of the shine in the flour. Magical butter is cleaner, it's brighter, and the effect is not nearly as couch locky. I don't want to knock people out. I want them to stay bright and shiny. And this setting and this machine gives me that option. Remember, we talked about all that olive oil getting a second life. So that green garlic is working over there with the thyme, gently caramelizing, and watch this as I time this perfectly. Here we go, last mushroom into the pan, and a nice big pinch of salt, and in garlic and thyme oil, a different kind of infusion, legal in all states. So you could probably do this a little bit classier than I'm doing it, say with a strainer. But we're working with what we have. The mushrooms are oiled. And trust me when I tell you that this smells pretty fantastic. A good mix. There we go. And this is gonna go into a 400-degree oven, 10 minutes to start, and then we'll check it. We're looking for lightly browned and water gone. Okay, and the last piece of our tart filling is Swiss chard. This, like I said, it's hot, so this is a little wilty, but this is a fantastic electric and pretty trippy plant. This is a variety called Bright Lights. Comes in pink, yellow, white, orangey red. For this tart, we're just gonna take the leaves off, not use the stems. And then what we're gonna do is blanch and shock the leaves. And that's a fancy way of saying, put them in boiling water, take them out of the boiling water, and put them in ice water. That's the shocking part of it. And I'm just gonna go right across it. Pretty straightforward. One more squeeze. And that's because water will dilute flavor. So let's get rid of water and be in charge of flavor. Chard, green garlic, waiting on those cute little mushrooms. Let's turn our attention to the custard, which we're gonna build right on top of this. Cheese tart. Ricotta is a simple, fresh cheese made with acid. It's not a molded cheese. Kind of like cottage cheese, not so curdy. I use the whole milk rather than the skim milk ricotta because I like the flavor. And the recipe calls for 2 cups. I'm professional. 1, 2 cups, and some change. Go away, ricotta. And then some parm. My recipe calls for 1 cup. This is more like 1.5 cups, and that's okay. And the reason that I'm doing that like this is not because I don't care. It's more to underscore the idea that this isn't hard and fast. This is about what you have on hand. It's about how you're feeling. And it's kind of about not measuring too much, because that's not fun. And it's a custard because it's got eggs in it. Here are 3, which is plenty. If it had more than that, it would be runny, it'd be wetter. It would certainly set up and get bouncy, but it might do so at the expense of the crust. Chard, green garlic, thyme, ricotta, Parmesan, eggs, looking for mushrooms. I would like to cook these more, but I'm not going to. I'm just gonna put them in there. Wouldn't mind if having a little bit of color on them, but at the same time, these will be nice too. A little bit more tender than the crispy versions. All right, and so that too is gonna loosen up that custard a little bit, the heat of the oyster mushrooms. I also like to leave them whole because they look so strange and kind of foreign. Oh, that looks pretty darn delish. Always taste your food. Another pinch of salt. You know better than anybody when stuff's delicious. If it's not salty enough, put some salt in it. If it needs a little acid, squeeze of vinegar, some lemon juice. Pepper, you like it hot? Do that. You're in charge. Okay, this is the final step. We've got the crust rolled out beautifully in our dropout pans with the fluting on the side. The filling, not medicated, well seasoned, and I cannot stress that enough. Make it delicious, dang it. Don't do what I say, do what your mouth says. Err on the side of being just underneath the rim and do a careful job of putting it in the shell so that you don't have to go back through and do a whole bunch of gymnastics to make it look nice. See that? I would say that is 2/3 full. A tart is sort of like painting. It's not the last step, it's the first step. It's the prep that makes it nice. Does it push into the flutes? Is it flat? Is it crisp? A little whack just to settle everything. And here we go. One thing that I always say in cooking is get your color first, and that goes for a lot of things. In a crust, that means make sure that the bottom is brown. You can cook it higher in the oven at a lower temperature and continue cooking it. But if everything's done and the crust is soggy, you're screwed. Get your color first. Bottom of the oven, this is at 400 degrees convection. We're gonna run it for 20 minutes. Then we're gonna spin it around and turn it down. Okay, I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I have a garden on the roof of my restaurant. And right now, rhubarb. And so we're gonna represent that by making a quick rhubarb vinaigrette that we will use to dress some vegetables, flowers, lettuces, and herbs for my rooftop garden. The rhubarb is cooked. So I'm just gonna cut it in small pieces, and we're gonna just make a mush. This is not a careful recipe. This is cook the rhubarb until it falls apart. Here's our rhubarb going into a pot with a pinch of salt, about a teaspoon of sugar, some red wine vinegar, a 1/4 cup of red wine vinegar, and about an equal part water as vinegar. I'm just gonna go to the sink. Quick little zap over here. Have I got this thing figured out? Yes, I do. We're on high heat. Just listen. And that thing will fall apart. And in the meantime, I'm gonna talk a little bit about salad, which is one of my all-time favorite things to make and to eat. Here are some different lettuces, some larger ones. This is really cool. This one's called Freckles or Troutback, as you can see. And then a couple little cute mustards, a red-stemmed Mizuna, ruby streaks, and arugula. These are just lightly tossed. I'm gonna put them right there. And in this bowl, this electric combination right here, are flowers from the roof. I've got calendula, which hippies talk about. Just the petals, bang. Nasturtiums have a lovely peppery bite. A yellow calendula, because we like electric colors. And these are kale flowers. This is my all-time favorite flower. It's called borage. And it's pretty blue, super tender, and tastes like a combination between cucumber and the rind of a watermelon, which might sound odd, but it's fabulous. These are garlic chives. Quick rip through, handful of those. Put in whatever you want, right? This is anise hyssop, Hyssop. The leaf is really soft. And not only do you feel that on your finger, but you feel it on your tongue. And I love this little unexpected surprise in salad. It has a really wonderful fennel-y flavor. Speaking of which, fennel from a young plant, so it's super tender. We're just gonna use some of these frilly bits. These are fava bean leaves, which have a really wonderful, pronounced beany taste. Radishes, these are what are called French breakfast radishes. That looks pretty good already. And one of the things that I do, especially when I'm cooking with cannabis, is try to make things visually appealing. I think if you're going all in and eating food that's got weed in it, you should know. It should look weird. It should be strange. It should be funny. My big takeaway here for you is salad dressing, because I don't think many people make it. And that's too bad. Salad dressing in the store is crappy. And it's easy. I like Dijon mustard, and almost all of my dressings follow the following template. Mustard, allium, that means something from the onion family. In this case, we're gonna use garlic and shallot. And I'm not going through the roof, I'm going right up to it. And I turn it and go right across. Nice little dice. 1 clove of garlic, half a shallot, let's say a tablespoon of Dijon. How are we doing over here, rhubarb? Is it mushy? So mushy. And as you might imagine, it's hot and sharp with that vinegar, and pretty too, look at that. I would say I'm gonna use 2 tablespoons of that. 3 tablespoons. I can't stop. Rhubarb, garlic, shallot, mustard. I might have put salt in there. I'll probably put more in there. And this is the infusion portion. We're gonna use Golden Goat, which is a sativa. I prefer to use sativas in my applications, but indica has a home as well. There are plenty of people who like the calming qualities of that particular strain or that particular style of cannabis. I am not one of them. I have no problem being calm. I'm gonna taste this, but I'm gonna do a little snappy trick and use the back of the spoon so I can go back in there. We tested this. It's 5 milligrams per milliliter. That's a lot. A tablespoon has 15 milliliters. 5 times 15 is 75 milligrams of THC in 1 tablespoon. Now is when you measure. He says, not measuring. We'll call out about a tablespoon, and there's one of those anise hyssop in there, and I didn't want to lose it, so I'm just gonna dump it right in. That is maybe a tablespoon plus. We'll say 80 mgs all day. And that's not enough olive oil, as you might imagine, nor is it enough vinegar. So we'll go in with, this is just plain old red wine vinegar. And this is just plain old extra virgin olive oil. The mustard is what helps to get all that stuff to stay together. That's why it looks creamy here and not separated into phases. You know how that garlic and those shallots and the rhubarb are gonna bloom as this cools in the fridge. I'm gonna put the greens, the herbs, the flowers, and the vegetables in there as well. When this is done, we'll mash them together. It's true that I'm not a good baker, and I really feel like baking is a different kind of mind. There is the scientific aspect, but there's also this idea of submitting to the recipe, and I don't like to do that. So baking is hard for me, so I do a few things well, and one of them is this cake. And one of the reasons that I do it well is because it's ridiculously easy. I feel kind of like I'm cheating. Dry stuff. 5 ounces of almond flour. 14 ounces of powdered sugar. Good God. 5 ounces of flour. AP, all-purpose flour. 1 1/4 cup of egg whites. 1 1/4 cup of egg whites. A pinch of salt, because I can't stop myself. And then 10 ounces of brown butter. Now the one other thing that's a little bit unusual about this 10 ounces of brown butter is that it has 4 ounces of sour, tangy, magical butter infused ghee in it. 6 ounces of brown butter, 4 ounces of trouble. I kind of mix all this other stuff, and I just dump that in there like that, blah, blah, blah. And I wish there were tricks to it. I wish that I had to do something chefy to make it work, but that's it. And the other thing about this cake that's especially nice from a restaurant point of view is that this batter that I'm whipping together right now firms up and holds in the fridge for, I don't know, 3 weeks. I've found some older than that and eaten it myself, but I wouldn't tell you to do that. When it's warm, it's pourable. But as you might imagine, when that butter cools down, it firms up. And one of the reasons I like that is because then I can use a portion container or scoop to make sure that each cake is the same dosage. That's our batter, and it's done, and we were just yapping, and now it's made, and the baking part is even easier. Pan spray. I use a non-stick little thing. This thing's seen some time, right? Look at it, it's all beat up on the corners. But, oh, yeah, see, I'm not doing good TV. Here we go. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it's a little green. I'm kind of scared. God, the smell of this combination of the can of butter and the brown butter is kind of wonderful. There are 8 brown butter cakes. They are going into a 400-degree oven. We'll check them out for 12 minutes. We are going to mash a couple of our items together, the tart with the oyster mushrooms, Swiss chard thyme and green garlic, ricotta and Parmesan. That tart took 40 minutes. I was right. And this is why I like those dropout pans, because the bottom has a little hole in it, and you just slide it right out. and you look like a star. This tart, I would say, you know, for an entree, you could get 4 portions out of it. For an app, 6. I take the outside crust off, and the reason I do that is because then I know that all of them are gonna be the same. If someone gets this edge crust, and that's where the wheat is, then good night. Here's our rhubarb vinaigrette. And that's got the goat in there. This is this combo platter of the salad and the tart is not for training wheels, kids. This is for heavy hitters. Lift it up, mix everything, go for sort of even. And make sure there's no clumps of dressing. Everything's well mixed. All right, I need just a hair more. And one of the tricks I like to do is I'll put the dressing over here so it doesn't get stuck on a leaf, and that way I can kind of bring what I think is not dressed into the dressing. When we plate it, we want to plate it in a way that I like to call a poofy, and that means that we want it to be kind of lofty, have a little bit of texture, sort of tighten it up a little bit without losing too much of the freshness. That's the infused Golden Goat roof lettuce and rhubarb salad, spring vegetable and ricotta tart in an infused Mycinex crust. I'd say 55 mgs in that whole dish. Again, as I said, that's kind of for the hitters. I'm not afraid, but I'm also not gonna do this for a big wide swath of people. I think that, you know, you'll learn your tolerance. It's no fun to have too much. Start slow, you'll be up to 55 in no time, I promise. Look at those steamy little critters. And you don't be afraid to get some color on the outside of this. That gets really caramelized and nutty and tasty. Look at that. That was, you know, just a little drama. And you're looking at that and you're like, you jerk, that's burnt. It's not, don't say that. It's fine. And we're gonna do one of those like Pillsbury kind of break in half shots that you see nice moms do on commercials. And then you'll be all like, I'm sorry, you're right, it looks great. Okay, get ready for that steamy pop. It's heavy, moist. That thing is so lovely. I'm hungry!